Welcome back to our channel, where we dive deep into the glamorous, yet treacherous world of Los Angeles fashion. Today is a beautiful day to unravel the darkest corners of human ambition, as we explore a storyline that has left us completely breathless and heartbroken. The shimmering glass walls of Forrester Creations have always reflected the pinnacle of haute couture, but behind those pristine reflections, a venomous corporate war has been brewing. The battle for the co-CEO seat has escalated into a destructive crusade. At the center is Logan Forrester, whose desire for power has blinded her to the collateral damage unfolding before her eyes. Her crusade to unseat Steffi Forrester Finnegan began as a maternal instinct to protect Hope's legacy after Steffi callously paused the hope for the future line. However, what started as a righteous fight for respect quickly metamorphosed into a dark, Machiavellian obsession. Brooke became intoxicated by the prospect of reclaiming the throne. The co-CEO title became a symbol of ultimate victory over Taylor Hayes' daughter. Brooke's ambition grew into a monstrous entity, devouring her rationality and empathy. She viewed every late-night strategy session as a necessary sacrifice on the altar of her corporate ascension. Caught in the merciless crossfire of this generational feud is Hope. Once the beacon of optimism, Hope has been slowly ground down into a strategic pawn in her mother's relentless chess game. Brooke pushed Hope into an endless, grueling strategic war, demanding that her daughter become the new, unassailable icon of the company. The pressure placed upon Hope was astronomical. She was no longer just a designer fighting for her line. She was the tip of the spear in Brooke's hostile takeover. Hope, driven by a desperate need to please her mother and validate her own worth, accepted this heavy mantle. She swallowed her exhaustion, masked her anxiety, and marched onto the corporate battlefield day after day, completely unaware that she was walking toward her own destruction. The human body can only endure so much psychological torment before it begins to manifest physical fractures. Hope was exhibiting undeniable signs of health instability, a lingering pallor, trembling hands, and a profound, bone-deep exhaustion that no amount of caffeine could cure. Yet, she stubbornly ignored the warning signs. She was carrying a precious secret, a new life growing within her, but the suffocating demands of the corporate coup left her no room to nurture herself. The irony is as cruel as it is devastating. While Hope was fighting to resurrect hope for the future, she was actively endangering her own literal future. Every time a wave of dizziness washed over her, she would blink it away, staring at the blueprints of Steffi's downfall, convincing herself that once the battle was won, she could finally rest. The dichotomy between the two warring factions intensified the pressure on Hope. Steffi stood fiercely defensive, childishly demanding Ridge protect her title, which only acted as an accelerant to Brooke's fury. Brooke's mastermind sessions with Hope were intense military briefings. Brooke would pace the room, outlining vulnerabilities in Steffi's leadership, while Hope furiously took notes, her vision blurring from fatigue. The tragic climax of this corporate warfare unfolded on a cold, unforgiving evening. The sprawling Forrester Creations building was deserted, the bustling energy replaced by a hollow silence. Hope sat alone in a dimly lit office, surrounded by stacks of financial reports and a meticulously crafted dossier designed to obliterate Steffi's co-CEO tenure. The glow of her laptop illuminated her pale face, highlighting the dark circles under her eyes. Hope was drowning in a sea of paperwork, her mind a chaotic whirlwind of numbers, strategies, and her mother's demanding voice echoing in her ears. She was so entirely consumed by the objective, so thoroughly brainwashed by the necessity of this victory, that she became completely disconnected from her own physical reality. The dossier had to be perfect. It had to be the ultimate weapon that Brooke could wield to secure the throne. In that isolated office, the lines between ambition and survival blurred into a terrifying amalgamation of duty and desperation. She was pushing her pregnant body far beyond its natural limits, fueled only by the toxic adrenaline of a corporate vendetta that wasn't even truly hers to fight. Then came the first visceral warning, a sharp, piercing agony that radiated through her abdomen, stealing the breath from her lungs. Hope gasped, her hands instinctively flying to her stomach. The pain was sudden and violent, a stark contrast to the sterile, organized documents spread across her desk. For a fleeting moment, panic flared in her chest. She reached for her phone, the instinct to call for help rising to the surface. But then, her eyes landed on the unfinished executive summary. The deadline was tomorrow. Brooke was counting on her. The twisted, toxic loyalty that had been ingrained in her overpowered her basic survival instincts. She gritted her teeth, convincing herself it was just stress, just a temporary cramp. She forced her hands back to the keyboard, prioritizing her mother's ambition over her own agonizing reality. But the body does not negotiate with corporate ambition. The pain intensified, morphing into a relentless, tearing sensation that brought tears of pure agony to her eyes. And then, the horrifying realization struck her. She was bleeding. Severe, terrifying hemorrhaging that stained her clothes and sent a shockwave of paralyzing fear through her entire being. Yet, even in the face of this undeniable medical emergency, the psychological grip of the dossier held her hostage. Her delay in seeking immediate medical intervention was a direct result of being so deeply entrenched in the war against Steffi. She tried to stand, her vision swimming with dark spots, her mind desperately trying to compartmentalize the trauma. Just one more page, she whispered to the empty room, a haunting testament to how far she had been pushed. The delay proved catastrophic. The sheer volume of blood loss and the overwhelming physical trauma finally broke through her stubborn endurance. Hope's legs gave out beneath her. She collapsed onto the cold, unforgiving floor of the office, her hands grasping wildly at the desk, bringing a cascade of strategic documents down with her. The papers, the very instruments of Steffi's proposed destruction, fluttered down around her like morbid confetti, covering her trembling, bleeding form. As darkness began to edge into her peripheral vision, the chilling silence of the room returned, indifferent to the vibrant life that was slowly slipping away on the designer carpet. The ultimate price of power was being paid in blood. Across town, Liam Spencer was wrestling with his own demons. His frustration with Hope's decision to remain at Forrester Creations instead of defecting to the safety of the Logan brand had been a constant source of tension. He had begged Hope to walk away from the toxicity, but she refused, blinded by loyalty to Brooke. Unable to shake a sudden, overwhelming sense of dread, Liam grabbed his keys and drove toward the Forrester building. The empty streets of Los Angeles offered no solace as he sped through the night. When Liam arrived at the towering glass monolith, the eerie quiet of the building amplified his anxiety. He bypassed security, his footsteps echoing loudly as he made his way to the executive floor. The hallway was bathed in shadows, the only light spilling from the slightly ajar door of Hope's office. He called out her name, his voice tight with fear, but there was no answer. Nothing could have prepared Liam for the scene that lay before him. The sight of Hope, pale and motionless on the floor amidst a sea of scattered documents, struck him with the force of a physical blow. The atmosphere inside the executive suite of Forrester Creations was thick with an unbearable, suffocating tension, a silent battleground where decades of loyalty were about to be brutally dismantled. Ridge Forrester stood at the precipice of a monumental decision, his broad shoulders weighed down by the impossible dilemma that had been thrust upon him. On one side stood Brooke Logan Forrester, the woman who had been his muse, his partner, and the beating heart of the company's international success for countless years. On the other side stood his daughter, Steffi Forrester Finnegan, her eyes blazing with a fierce, entitled defiance as she issued a childish, petulant ultimatum. Steffi demanded that Ridge prove his love for her by protecting her co-CEO title, framing a purely corporate decision as a twisted test of paternal devotion. The air grew colder as Ridge's gaze darted between the two women, his legendary decisive nature completely paralyzed by the emotional blackmail echoing off the mahogany walls. The silence stretched into an eternity before Ridge finally spoke. He capitulated, his words trembling with a cowardly hesitation as he explained to Brooke that he simply could not strip Steffi of her title, that the timing was wrong, that he needed to keep the peace within his family. It was a staggering betrayal, a moment where Ridge chose to coddle his daughter's rampant ego rather than honor the undeniable qualifications and historical contributions of his own wife. He tried to soften the blow, offering hollow platitudes and empty promises of future opportunities, but the damage was already done. Brooke stood perfectly still, absorbing the profound magnitude of his rejection. The man she loved had just demonstrated, with devastating clarity, that her ambition and her worth would always be secondary to Steffi's tantrums. In that agonizing fraction of a second, something fundamental shattered within Brooke Logan Forrester. But it was not her spirit. It was her infinite, exhausting patience. For years, she had played the role of the supportive wife, the forgiving matriarch, the eternal peacemaker who constantly compromised her own brilliance to maintain the fragile harmony of the Forrester family. She had watched Steffi run roughshod over Hope, marginalizing her daughter's brand while Ridge turned a blind eye to the blatant bullying disguised as executive strategy. As Brooke looked at Ridge's guilt-ridden face and Steffi's smug, triumphant smirk, a profound and icy epiphany washed over her. She realized that she would never be handed the respect she deserved within these walls, that Forrester Creations would always be a fortress designed to keep her in a subordinate place. The warmth drained from her eyes, replaced by a terrifying, absolute resolve. Without a single tear, without raising her voice to match the chaotic energy of the room, Brooke delivered a resignation that would forever alter the landscape of the global fashion industry. Her voice was remarkably steady, a cold, sharp blade slicing through the heavy silence as she informed Ridge that she was no longer asking for a seat at the table. She was leaving the building altogether. The sheer shock on Ridge's face was a testament to his arrogant assumption that Brooke would always forgive him, that she would always stay tethered to his side regardless of the indignities she suffered. Steffi's smug expression faltered, replaced by a flicker of genuine confusion as Brooke calmly gathered her belongings. This was not the emotional, pleading Brooke they had anticipated. This was a woman who had just realized the absolute, terrifying extent of her own power. The shockwave of Brooke's declaration had barely registered before the door to the executive office swung open, revealing Hope Logan Spencer. Hope had been pushed to her absolute breaking point by Steffi's condescending leadership, watching her beloved Hope for the Future line be callously shelved to prioritize Eric's couture. Hearing her mother's resignation, Hope did not hesitate for a singular, fleeting moment. The years of enduring Steffi's psychological warfare, the constant marginalization of her creative vision, and the blatant disrespect shown to her family culminated in a fierce, unyielding solidarity. Hope stepped to her mother's side, her posture radiating a newfound, radicalized strength, and announced her own immediate departure from Forrester Creations. The mother and daughter stood united, an impenetrable front of Logan resilience, leaving Ridge to stare in horrified disbelief at the sudden, catastrophic unraveling of his empire. But the exodus was not yet complete. From the corridor, having overheard the monumental shift in power, emerged Zend Forrester Dominguez. Zend had been simmering in a toxic stew of frustration and resentment, marginalized and cast aside in favor of R.J. Forrester, his brilliant designs for hope for the future locked away in the dark archives of Steffi's short-sighted decisions. He had complained bitterly to Carter Walton about the lack of respect and creative freedom, and now, watching Brooke and Hope draw a line in the sand, Zend recognized the opportunity he had been desperately waiting for. With a dramatic flair born of years of suppressed artistic passion, Zend threw his portfolio of shelved designs onto the boardroom table and declared his allegiance to the Logans. He was walking out, taking his immense talent and his profound grievances with him, leaving Forrester Creations bleeding its brightest creative minds in a matter of minutes. The departure of Brooke, Hope, and Zen from the Forrester building was not merely a walkout. It was a regal procession, a symbolic shifting of the tectonic plates beneath the Los Angeles fashion world. As they marched through the sleek corridors, past the bewildered seamstresses and the whispering executives, the very foundation of the company seemed to tremble. They left behind a deafening, terrifying silence in the executive suite. Ridge sank into his leather chair, the physical manifestation of his catastrophic failure crashing down upon him as he realized the magnitude of what he had just allowed to happen. Steffi stood frozen, her desperate need for control having just triggered the greatest mass defection in the history of her grandfather's legacy. Carter Walton's prophetic warnings about the devastating consequences of their hubris echoed in the empty room, a haunting soundtrack to the beginning of the end. Far away from the suffocating traditions of the Forrester mansion, a new empire was being forged in the fires of betrayal and absolute determination. Brooke, Hope, and Zend did not retreat to lick their wounds. They immediately mobilized, channeling their collective fury and unparalleled expertise into the creation of a revolutionary fashion house, Logan Couture. This was not a modest startup or a quiet boutique. This was a massive, aggressively funded corporate behemoth designed from its very inception to dominate the global market. Brooke leveraged her decades of international contacts, her intimate knowledge of supply chains, and her unparalleled relationships with the world's most elite buyers to secure massive capital and prime real estate. The new headquarters of Logan Couture was a masterpiece of modern architecture, a towering structure of glass and steel that reflected the dawn of a ruthless new era. Within the walls of Logan Couture, a breathtaking metamorphosis took place. Brooke Logan Forrester shed the final remnants of the accommodating muse and fully embraced her identity as an apex corporate predator. She was no longer the woman who needed a man's validation or a family's permission to lead. She was the supreme architect of her own destiny. Her strategic mastermind sessions with Hope evolved into brilliant, aggressive business plans that targeted the exact vulnerabilities of Forrester Creations. Brooke's leadership was characterized by a cold, calculating precision, a stark contrast to the emotional volatility that plagued the Forrester boardroom. She moved with the lethal grace of a woman who knew exactly what she was worth and was determined to make everyone who had doubted her pay an exorbitant price. Hope Logan Spencer experienced an equally profound rebirth within the nurturing yet fiercely competitive environment of Logan Couture. Freed from the suffocating weight of Steffi's condescension and the constant threat of having her line paused, Hope's creativity exploded into a kaleidoscope of brilliant, forward-thinking designs. She was no longer just a figurehead or a marginalized designer. She was a co-founder, an executive whose voice carried absolute authority. The trauma of being belittled at Forrester transformed into an unyielding drive to prove her detractors wrong. She worked tirelessly alongside Zend, their collaborative synergy producing collections that were not only ethically conscious but breathtakingly avant-garde, immediately capturing the attention of the fashion press that had grown tired of Forrester's predictable, legacy-reliant offerings. For Zend, Logan Couture was the ultimate liberation, a sanctuary where his immense talent was finally revered rather than suppressed. Given the prestigious title of lead designer, Zend poured his soul into the fabrics, creating masterpieces that blended classic elegance with daring, modern innovation. He felt a fierce, unwavering loyalty to Brooke and Hope, the women who had recognized